My name is Rick Shangraw. I'm the CEO of the Arizona State University Foundation. Couldn't be more excited to have everybody here for the next day and a half to have what I consider to be a set of interesting and important discussions around intentional investing. I'm sort of in a unique position here. Just before I took on the job of running the foundation here, I was also director of the Global Institute of Sustainability. So I come to this position in the foundation with a deep appreciation of many of the issues we're going to be talking about today. But that being the case, I actually don't have any great answers. So if you're expecting me to give you the ASU solution to the problem, you will not get it. What you'll hear from us is probably what you'll hear from many people in the room here today, which is what are people thinking, what are some options, how can I address these issues, what conversation can I have with my stakeholders, because that's where we are in the process. We do not have a definitive policy statement around ESG investing for our foundation. We've had discussions, we've had debates, we've had arguments. But we are in that process right now, and so we couldn't be happier to be here to hear what everybody else has to say, and for Tony and George and his team to help us begin framing the issue. I would be remiss, when I usually stand up and there are politicians in the room, I have to recognize them, but I do have to recognize my investment committee chair, Roger Whitland, who's here. I'm not certain if I report to Roger or Roger reports to me or he reports to the board, but anyhow, I spend a lot of time with Roger, and I'm glad that other members of the investment committee here, including the CFO of and Executive Vice President of Arizona State University, Morgan Olson, who's sitting in the front row here, has also joined us. And you'll get a chance to hear from President Crow tomorrow morning, and I'm sure he'll have some exciting things to say. But in general, what I want to do is welcome you, make sure you're comfortable. My team is here standing in the back. You can see my folks, and they've done a fantastic job working with Tony and his team. Thank you. But they're here also to make sure that anything you need, and any help you need, please don't hesitate to ask them. We're happy to help out. The only thing I can't do is convince Tony to cut the program short tomorrow. We're supposed to be 75 degrees and sunny out tomorrow. But if you're a golf player, it's going to be a fantastic day tomorrow. And with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Tony. Thank him and his team for doing all the heavy lifting on the program and what you're going to hear today. I've known Tony for many years. I not only ran into him here when I was over at the Global Institute of Sustainability, but I also knew him when I sat on the board of trustees at Dickinson College, where Dickinson was actively involved in sustainability issues, and Tony came in and did some consulting and work for Dickinson. So he's been a friend and a good colleague for many years, and I'm glad he's here. Tony?
Thank you. The first thing I want to say is welcome. Thank you for coming. We just deliberately tried to have this here at Arizona State University for two reasons. The first reason that you'll appreciate the most is because of the weather at this time of year. But the biggest reason is because Arizona State University has been an incredible leader. There is no other public university in the country or the world that has a mission around deep sustainability for everyone in society than Arizona State University. And if Michael Crow doesn't brag enough about ASU tomorrow, I will. Because Arizona State was Michael Crow was the first, one of the first signatories of the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. Why are we here? You're here to talk about investments, but I want to create a little context about this. Humanity is at a crossroads without historical precedent. Because of the extraordinary and exponential growth of population and the expansive dynamic of industrial capitalism, humans have become a planetary force comparable in disruptive power to the ice ages and the asteroid collisions that have previously redirected Earth's history. Despite all the work society has done on environmental protection, as an example, all living systems are in long-term decline and are declining at an increasing rate. We are severely disrupting the stability of the climate and the Earth's ecosystems, which made human progress to date possible. These trends are exacerbated by projected growth in population, resource consumption, and consumer demand, coupled with declining resiliency in social and ecological systems. Sustainability challenges related to climate disruption, water, food, economic inequality, poverty, and social unrest pose an existential threat to society. Nearly 3 billion people are without sanitation, make less than $2.50 a day, and over 1 billion lack adequate water supply or nutrition. This is happening with 30% of the world's population consuming 70 to 80% of the world's resources, and we are on track to have 3 billion new middle-class consumers by 2030. So the question is, how do we find a way for all the 9 billion people that will not be on the planet by the middle of the 21st century to have a decent quality of life, a decent job, live in strong, thriving communities? That's really the issue. Throughout most of our species' 200,000-year existence, our ancestors had to cope with a chaotic climate marked by extreme variability, a climate that could not support agriculture. The world as we know it, with agriculture, civilization, and dense human numbers, has only been possible because of a rare interlude of climate grace, a long summer of unusual climate stability over the past 11,700 years. Now, despite what we may hear through the mainstream media, first slide, please. There is widespread consensus among climate scientists and our most respected scientific institutions that climate change is real, human-induced, threatening to a thriving society, and happening at a far faster rate than scientists predicted as late as 5 years ago. In fact, what they predicted, what is happening today was predicted to occur 20 to 30 years from now, not what is happening already. The overwhelming scientific evidence tells us that we must leave 80% of the fossil fuel assets of major companies and countries in the ground if we are to avoid catastrophic climate disruption. Next slide, George. In July of 2012, based on the work of the Carbon Tracker Initiative, in an issue of the Rolling Stone, Global Warming's Terrifying New Math, writer and activist Bill McKibben boiled the hard truth about climate down to these three stark numbers. 2 degrees Celsius, the amount, according to the international consensus, that we can raise the global average temperature above pre-industrial levels and still maintain a so-called safe climate, beyond which all bets are off. Right now, we are seeing the effects that we're seeing already at 0.8 degrees centigrade increase. 565 gigatons, the amount of carbon scientists agree we can still pump into the atmosphere and hope to remain below the 2-degree threshold. And by the way, there's a lot of the scientific community that doesn't believe the 2-degree threshold is adequate. And we will reach that at the current rate before 2030. 2,800 gigatons, the amount of carbon contained in the world's proven fossil fuel reserves, which the fossil fuel industry shows every intention of extracting and burning. Right now, they're spending $680 billion per year in exploration for new fossil fuels. A recent analysis indicates that the return on capital expenditure for investment in exploration has been reduced by 50% over the last 5 years. It's the lowest in 40 years. And you see what's happening to the price of oil right now. Making investments in some of these areas is not a very good bet. The bottom line is that we have to find a way to leave 80% of accessible fossil fuels in the ground forever and make a rapid shift to clean energy if we're going to avoid the very real risk of catastrophic climate change within this century. In essence, the routine business of our civilization is threatening our own survival. If we continue business as usual, today's students and their children will find themselves in a world with greatly diminished prospects for a good quality of life, peace, and security. We are faced with the greatest intergenerational equity challenge in modern history. As Einstein once said, we can't solve today's problems at the, you heard the Boston accent there, we can't solve today's problems at the level of thinking at which they were first created. We need a change in mindset. Now, the genesis of this forum stems from two efforts. Second Nature, an organization I had the privilege to found and lead, has been working to transform the education, research, operations, and community service of higher education because it is the only sector capable of creating the broad scale and necessary change in mindset, skills, and values of professional leaders over the long term. We are a critical institution in society. In this work, we led the development and the implementation of the American College and University President's Climate Commitment, a publicly transparent and accountable commitment by 679 colleges and universities in all 50 states and the District of Columbia to become carbon neutral in their operations and prepare students to help the rest of society do the same. ASU, as I said earlier, has been a leader. There have been impressive results. A 25% overall reduction in carbon emissions in 6 years and financial savings of $1 to $2 billion is perhaps the clearest indicator that sustainability is becoming a strategic imperative for higher education. By the way, there is no other sector that is committed to do what is scientifically necessary, and that is to become carbon neutral in its own time. It can't happen overnight. Despite this progress and explosion of new educational and operational initiatives, most of these schools have not focused on the health, social, or environmental impacts of their investments. Now the combination of the climate crisis and the student divestment movement have made this issue a very central one for universities and their leaders. Most of them are dealing with these issues individually. This led to the second effort, to help colleges and universities align their endowments with their mission, environmental, social, and governance goals without sacrificing financial returns. In April of this year, Jonathan Lash, president of Hampshire College, and I were talking about, he was formerly the president of the World Resources Institute. He called up and said, you know, I'm getting a lot of questions from colleges about what to do about the divestment issues. And he said, what do you think about holding a conference to help colleges and universities figure out a way to deal with these issues? And I said, fine, as long as we can do something that will be ongoing to support the colleges in doing this. As a result of that very successful conference, we launched the Intentional Endowments Network, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide, George. All investments have health, social, economic, and environmental impacts. The challenge we have is that for the most part, we have ignored anything but the economic impacts of what's going on. So in a sense, all investing is impact investing. Everything we do, we hope that it's a positive impact. And when we do economic growth, we're hoping that we'll have a positive impact. But sometimes there are consequences that we didn't plan for. And so now we have to think about investing from a different perspective. The idea of socially responsive or responsible investing, sustainable investing, or what we will be defining here today, is not something that just happened in the last three or four years. The modern concept of socially responsible investing emerged in the 1960s and the 1970s. Shareholder activism stemming from the civil rights, anti-war, and environmental movements of the 1960s put pressure on companies, driving them to respond with corporate social responsibility initiatives. The 1970s saw the emergence of the first socially screened mutual funds. Many of the people that are here today were pioneers in creating those investment funds and vehicles that I was just talking about. Throughout the 1980s, key issues and events accelerated the growth of these practices, such as apartheid in South Africa, the gas leak in the 1984 gas leak in Bhopal, India, that killed about 15,000 people, Chernobyl, the 1986 nuclear accident, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, which, by the way, resulted in the creation of Ceres. That's what stimulated the creation of Ceres. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, as the sustainability movement grew and matured, so did the sustainable investment field. With increasing sophistication, investors have integrated social and environmental issues from climate change, deforestation, and toxic waste to indigenous peoples' rights, labor practices, and gun control into investment criteria. There has been an increase in institutional acceptance of the relevance of ESG factors in decision-making. Can I have the next slide? This is a slide from the U.S. Social Investment Forum that measured trends in socially responsible investing over the last, since 1995. And what they found in the most recent report is that the U.S. domiciled assets under management using SRI strategies expanded from 3.74 million at the start of 2012 to 6.57 trillion at the start of 2014, an increase of 76%. This represents 16% of the total assets that are under management in the world. The next slide, please. A number of investors have gotten together and started saying, we want to understand what the impacts of our investments are. And there are three major efforts that have been developed to deal with these issues. The Principles for Responsible Investment by the United Nations now has 1,263 institutional investors and 3.4 million that cover $3.4 trillion in assets. And it has 6 principles for integrating ESG into decision-making and throughout the investment industry. CDP, which was called formerly the Carbon Disclosure Project, a number of companies, institutional investors, started saying they wanted to know what the impact was of carbon and other impacts before they invested in them. So they developed a criteria and a set of questions to deal with climate change, water, supply chains, and forest risk. 762 institutional investors with $92 trillion in assets. And then finally, the Investor Network in Climate Risk, with 100 institutional investors and $12 trillion in assets that you'll hear Chris Davis from Ceres talk about a little bit later. You know, in some sense, can I have the next slides, please? So we decided to do two things to deal with this challenge for higher education. One was, the first thing we decided to do was to work on the President's climate commitment, and we did that very successfully. The second thing we tried to do was to create a support network for colleges and universities to deal with these issues. Our goal with the Intentional Endowments Institute is not simply about divestment, but it is about how we positively think about making a difference with our investments that get you sound financial returns, is achieving the environmental and social and governance goals, and helping to move society's capital investment towards more sustainable practices. That's the whole purpose of the Intentional Endowments Network. We want to work through and with a whole bunch of organizations to do these 5 kinds of things, which we'll describe later during this forum. But the important thing about this is we want to work with and through all kinds of organizations. Common Fund, that's here today. Ceres, with many of the investment community members, with the heads of foundations and others, the Association of Governing Boards, the NACUBO, the National Association of College and University Business Officers. We want to work with and through them to provide you with the education, the materials, the peer learning, and the opportunities to understand the potential for moving in this direction. May I have the next one, please? In some sense, it's ironic that we have to have such a conference. If the economic system told the truth about the real cost to society of its actions and was designed for the mutual well-being of people, communities, and nature, all investments would be socially and environmentally responsible in their impacts. It's funny that we had to come up with this name, socially responsible investing, sustainable investing, because the lack of the market system to include the externalized impacts that the market creates on people, communities, and on the environment is not included. Because it is not, efforts like those of the leaders represented at this conference have been working to reorient the economic system through a variety of policy initiatives and financial instruments that we will all learn about today. Unfortunately, time is not on our side. The rate of growth of the challenges are really challenging. I want to emphasize what we're trying to do. We want to have positive, comprehensive, integrated approaches to dealing with the investments that make a difference for you and make a difference for the rest of society. This is not a divestment conference. We're not interested in just taking away some of the negative things. We're interested in seeing what can you do with the investments that will make a positive impact on society for the long run. Our challenge is to learn how to make this a reality in the most appropriate way in our institutions and at your own speed. You don't have to do this overnight. You can think about this as a comprehensive policy direction. At Pitzer College, where they decided to divest from fossil fuels, what they did was really quite interesting. The head of the investment committee, when presented with the petition from the students to divest, immediately said, this is not an investment committee issue, and went right back to the chair of the board of trustees and to the president and said, this is a policy issue. And we have also made a commitment to becoming carbon neutral in our operations. And yet we don't have a very good plan to do this. So he proposed that they should take a look at everything that the college was doing, because society expects colleges to be a model for sustainability in everything that they do. So they went back and they formed a group of trustees, faculty, students, administrators, and came up with a comprehensive plan to how to deal with both the investments and how to develop a more constructive and robust climate action plan. So that's what I hope we will do, is to integrate it. We've designed an integrated and we hope empowering process for our gathering to help all of you individually and collectively to be able to address these issues. Before I turn it over to Barbara, I just want to say something about the people in the room. We have a lot of people from academia. We also have a lot of people from the investment industry. And the people from the investment industry that are here have over 300 higher education clients. So the impact of what we can develop here with good ideas and that you can share among each other can have a very strong ripple effect. I'd like to introduce the team that's been working on all of this terrific work. First, my partner, George Dyer, George was our vice president for programs at Second Nature, and one of the brightest people I've ever met. Why he still works with me, I don't know, but he chooses to do so. A lot of you have been talking to him. He was the author of the primer that we sent to you. I hope you had a chance to read it ahead of time because it really helped. Barbara Simonetti she'll going to tell you her story in a minute, but she is one of the leading people in helping corporations and others to deal with difficult dialogue, and she designed the process, the interactive process that we're going to be using for the next day and a half. Dr. Joanne Chu, where's Joanne? You there? Hey, Joanne. Joanne is a neuroscientist and has taught at Spelman and Agnes Scott, and was the director of sustainability at Georgia State, and she's now doing some volunteering with us right now. Yvonne Vogt, who just graduated from Columbia in the Sustainable Development Program, and she's been working with us for the last 3 months and moving on to bigger and better things, unfortunately for us, but great for her. And then I wanted to introduce Danielle Farris and Amanda Schwartzbaugh. Where's Amanda? She's probably outside. But these are our partners from Yellow Chair, and they really are magnificent people in putting on these kinds of events. They're just so professional and so dependent, and we've worked with them for years and are really delighted to have them here. And finally, I want to introduce Bob Litterman. Bob, you'll be talking to later. Bob has spent about 20-something years working for Goldman Sachs as the chief risk management person, and he's a very well-known person in the field of impact investing. And he's the chairman of the board of Common Fund and has been the greatest champion of the Intentional Endowments Network. And it's because of him, through his family foundation, that we were able to get the initial support to get us off the ground. So Bob, a hearty thank you to you for everything that you're doing. And so